Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the very first video lecture you guys are going to experience this year in advanced biology. This one is going to cover the very beginnings of Chapter 1. So we're here to study biology, and as we know, biology is the study of life, right? So the idea of the beginning here is to find out really what is life, what are the requirements of life, and what is it that we really want to get out of this year as we sort of delve into all of that. So let's get going. A couple of things about requirements of living things. Living things have to be able to metabolize, and what that means is they're going to break down molecules. They're going to break it down for energy and go through a series of chemical reactions. Our bodies and living things and cells constantly are experiencing chemical reactions like crazy. So this one, no joke, huge, okay? And we are going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Other requirements of life is the fact that they are going to respond to a stimulus. Okay, and they're not just going to totally be a lump on a log. Even if they look like a lump on a log, they're going to respond to stimuli. We're also going to have organization. Even if you are a single-celled amoeba, even if you are a blue whale, there's an organization to life. And of course, the only way we can make more life is for reproduction. So life will reproduce. And that's why life has been around for so long, because the life is going to beget more life. There's going to be growth. Fortunately for your mom, you weren't as big as you are now when you were born. So there was a certain amount of growth that's occurred over the course of your lifetime, as well as development. You're not the same as you were when you were born. We also find that life is going to exchange material with the environment. We take in oxygen, we release carbon dioxide, we release waste, we take in water. All of these things are really important. And there's a certain adaptation to the environment that occurs. Now, this is something we're going to get into way later in the year when we start talking about natural selection and evolution, but life in terms of populations over time change. And then the biggest thing, hence why it's huge, hence why it's in big red letters, cells, DNA are vital. That is a main component. The fact that living things are made of cells, living things contain DNA or some form of genetic material, and there is protein synthesis. You will become so familiar with proteins over the course of this year. So let's talk a little hierarchy now. Life has organization, as we mentioned before. So we begin at the very bottom. So hopefully you can see this. Hopefully I'm not covering it up, but it says atom. And the atom is our smallest form. The atom is the smallest form of matter. You guys probably learned a little bit about this last year. And we'll talk a little bit about atomic structure. You learned a little bit about it in your summer reading. From the atom, if we combine multiple atoms together chemically, where they join and hold bonds, like what you read about, then you get a molecule. Once we start having molecules interact with one another for a common purpose, for a common function, we get what we call an organelle. Now, if you recall maybe a little bit of some cell structure stuff from middle school, an organelle would be something like the nucleus. Okay, that should be an O. So something like a nucleus, or something like, very fun word to say. Oops. Very fun word to say. Endoplasmic reticulum. That's another one. And these are all functioning structures within a cell that allow the cell to do the work it needs to do. Get a bunch of organelles working together for their common function as a whole unit. Then we have the cell, and the cell is fundamentally the basic unit of life. Nothing below here is living on its own, but everything from here up is. So multiple cells working together in a common function is known as a tissue. Then you have an organ. Okay, so a bunch of tissues working together is an organ. So again, you know, think of like muscle tissue. Okay, that steak you might have had last night off the grill. And then you get your organ. Okay, all of those working together, multiple tissues, something like your heart. Get a bunch of organs working together, you have an organ system, and finally the actual critter itself, or your organism. So just to give you a little insight into some different types of life, one of the smallest forms of life is bacteria, and that kingdom is known as Monera, and they can actually be broken up into two groups that we're going to spend a little time talking about. You have Eubacteria, and then there's Archaea Bacteria. So actually, your bacteria groups are actually broken up into two different kingdoms. Archaea Bacteria is like your wicked old school ones. I mean, we're talking like early can live in hot springs out in Yellowstone, are found at the bottom of the ocean's depths where they're, you know, metabolizing sulfur and things like that. And then we have our Eubacteria, which is your everyday bacteria that you might find on your door handle or in fact on the keyboard that you're using right now. So there's just some forms of bacteria. And there's your archaea right there, and that's a form of your, you know, basically your archaea bacteria. This would be more like your Eubacteria. We also have protists, and protists are also single-celled. They one cell at a time. And the thing about protists is that they are not like bacteria in that they have all of those sort of typical organelles inside of them. So a protist would be like your paramecium, maybe you saw them swimming around, or an amoeba if you go out and look at pond water under your microscope. So a few other protists, except for this one. That's a red blood cell. Okay, this would be a protist, which is a parasitic protist. And there are some of those as well. Then we have your fungus, okay, or the kingdom known as fungi, your mushrooms, your molds, that kind of thing. I think some of you might be familiar with those. We have probably everybody, maybe everybody's favorite, but the animal kingdom, and this obviously includes us, as well as a multitude of things. And lastly, although very important, are your plants. And without plants, the rest of us don't exist. So as far as how we take life and begin to classify it and break it down, these are what we refer to as our kingdoms. So how we break down living things, and we can actually group them. Humans like grouping. We like things orderly. You know, this fungus over here has no idea that it's a fungus. The bacteria doesn't know it's a bacteria, or the tree doesn't know it's a tree. We've made those designations. So a little bit about classification. We do take the kingdoms like we said before. So we have our most broad categories are called kingdoms. Then we can take each individual kingdom and create a grouping within that, and that's a phylum. And take your phylum and break it down into a class, an order, a family, a genus, a species, until everything in this group here, everything is the same, meaning they share common characteristics, but the key is they can mate and form fertile offspring. Okay, so that's really the key part. So this breaks down into a leopard, where you have, or a panther, or however you want to call it, where you have all the way down to the genus, and then this here, I should say, it's kind of a typo, Panthera pardus. That is the actual species name of this guy here. Okay. So anyway, we're not going to spend a ton of time on classification, but just to give you a little insight into the breakdown. that's going to do it for today. We're going to get into the next part another time.